Hey guys, this is Josh Heaney. I'm a saxophonist and educator, and today I'm really happy to introduce a good friend of mine, a great jazz saxophonist, Kyle Brooks. Kyle, why don't you tell us about yourself?
I am a recent graduate of Bowling Green State University. I've been playing jazz saxophone for about 11 years. I've spent my past studying jazz, rock, funk, pop, and classical for a long time. I'm about to start my doctorate at Indiana University this fall. I'm very excited to talk about all these horns in front of me, but kind of my journey playing on the same saxophone for the better part of my development the past 10 years. Recently in January, I purchased my first Selmer Mark VI, which I am having a fantastic time with. I'm learning about myself with it, I'm learning about the horn, and learning about the music.
Kyle's a serious player. He's out of the Chicago area, and he gigs all the time. Real up-and-comer, fantastic person and player, so keep an eye on him. But today we have all these horns in front of us. My Series 3, as you've seen in many videos, Kyle has a reference 54. Is that a hummingbird?
Hummingbird edition from 2005.
Very rare horn. And then he has a 5-digit Mark VI here. So we just wanted to talk about the Mark VI a little bit, which, as you know, is a wonderful topic among saxophonists. Never a source of argument at all, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to talk about this core question, which was, do you need a Mark VI? So, Kyle, you said you came from your reference 54 and you played that for a long time. How'd you get that horn, and what's the story?
The story behind this horn is very interesting, actually. I acquired it from my teacher in high school, who originally worked for Selmer, and he managed to get it, straight from the factory. He is a tenor player primarily. He was just needing to get rid of this horn, save some money, totally understand. So I grabbed this horn. I was 14 years old. I was a young lad. I was a freshman in high school. So this horn has just, all of my development has happened on this horn. This has got me through 4 years of high school, wind ensemble, jazz band, all that. 5 years in my undergrad, and the first year of my master's degree.
So that really says a lot. If you have a horn that you've stuck with for so long, and it's not just the horn you played in jazz band, but it's the horn you used for everything. That really says a lot about how flexible of a horn it is. How would you feel about, giving it a blow and telling us what it sounds like?
Sure. I will say right off the bat, I have so much sentimental attachment to this reference. I've gotten to do a lot with this horn, which is great. And it was really hard to not even to sell it, but to just move on to another instrument. While there are a lot of very beautiful, positive aspects of this instrument, we're going to get into some topics about like what to consider when buying a reference, and I'll explain my reasoning for moving from a reference to a Mark VI. My biggest compliment to this instrument is the fact that it's so even from bottom to top. It's about the same amount of work I need to put in to have it sounding nice and full in the low B flat, as much as it is to get a crisp, clean sound in the altissimo register. The scale just feels nice going up and down, I have no problem navigating the different reaches of the instrument. As far as the key work, it feels similar. It feels like a modern Selmer. You have bigger hands than I do.
Yeah.
But I still, I have, fair size hands, and it feels great. Obviously, if you can see, I have some cork risers put on by Paul Maslin at PM Woodwind in Chicago, one of my favorite music stores of all time. And I also have a ramped riser on my high E key. Some vintage Selmers had this, some Yamahas have this, but it really has made a big difference in helping, the high E be accessible in a pinch.
Yeah, that looks like a Series 3 with the little ramp there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's great. You had some issues with this horn where you felt that you needed to start searching for a Mark VI. So what kind of drove you to the edge and made you start searching?
My issues with this horn became the most prevalent when I started doing my long tones every day. My biggest issue with this instrument is high A and above just pushes very sharp. Obviously, every instrument you're going to come across is not going to be perfect in intonation. Every horn has their tendencies of like what's gonna push sharp or what's gonna pull flat. The bell keys are going to be a little bit out, which is like for this horn within like I can adjust it. Fairly close.
Yeah, a little sharp on that low B flat, but that's most horns will do that.
Right. And that's something that, I can deal with and like adjust. But when it comes to the A and above, it just starts to get very sharp. Now, if I'm not adjusting,
That's a good 10 cents.
yeah. Like, yeah, very sharp, right?
That C sharp's a killer.
I have so much love for this instrument, but with intonation issues like that, it takes years of like diligent practicing to like make that differentiation that like, okay, it's the horn, it's not you. I was trying other instruments at the time, just like I'd try my friend's Yamaha or I'd try my friend's Six or something, and I wasn't having that issue.
You had mentioned you can adjust, you can change your voicing, you can do alternate fingerings, but there are times when you just shouldn't or can't do that. For example, you're playing fast runs, you're playing bebop or something, you're not going to be throwing down the right hand when you're up in the palm keys. It's just too cumbersome. And if you're doing a ballad and you want to keep your tone and timbre the same, you can't be throwing down extra fingers all the time. Yeah. You got this Mark VI over here, wonderful 5-digit. Why don't you tell us about that?
Made in 1958. This was one of, as some of you may know, there were 3 different bows that Selmer used on the Mark VIs. You have a short bow, a medium bow, and the long bow. And then at the end of the run, Selmer went back to medium-sized bows briefly. This is among the first of the bows to be a medium bow. Historically, the short bows and the long bows had pretty severe intonation issues, and it was the medium bows that generally had the closest intonation. It's not perfect, but no horn is.
This was such an issue on the Mark VI that they kept tweaking the design of so many parts of the horn over the years. They changed the neck taper, they changed the bow, like you said. There's even some American assembled horns where they soldered bits of spare metal inside the bow. They never really nailed it to the same degree that a modern horn would be perfectly in tune, but I'd say that of the Mark VI is that you have one that's a pretty good compromise.
The purpose of a lot of that, was to just help with the pitch, especially the bell keys. More material inside the bell is going to naturally bring the pitch down, and the low B and the low B flat. That's why I use the donut. It brings my 2 bell keys down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I'll play a little bit of this, and I guess things to be wary of as I'm playing this. Think about the scale and the fluidity compared to my reference should be pretty similar, but then also the intonation is going to be the biggest X factor here. I love playing this horn. The biggest selling factor of the Mark VI is definitely the sound concept. Obviously, someone's played this horn for a long time before this fell into my hands. Being what a nearly 63-year-old instrument. And obviously that you can talk about the folklore, the superstition behind that, and obviously I will say there is a lot of superstition about Mark VIs.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of rumors, just a lot of talking. But at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to the shape of the sound, and you can hear the sound of the saxophone. I feel like this is such a focused instrument that it's very clear where like the character of this instrument stands.
I hear less high buzz on that horn compared to the reference, but some of those lower, more immediate overtones, like the first and second and third ones, that really add to projection without sounding bright.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are really present on this particular horn.
It sings and it does what I need it to do without having the sort of intonation issues I was experiencing with the reference.
Yeah. I mean, you sound really at home at it.
So first I'll do a little bit of the upper octave just to hear the comparison to the reference. So while very even, the intonation isn't perfect. It was a little bit sharp in some points, but this is definitely something that's negotiable.
Yeah.
I can make that work in a setting playing with the band. I'm going to hear that right away and I'm going to adjust.
The high A is so much more in tune than the reference, which is kind of shocking. You usually think of a newer horn as being more precise with the intonation, but that one note, man, it's worth it for that A and the C sharp too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just made my life so much easier, and I'm just like grateful for this horn. So the bell keys, I'll go without the donut first, and as you can tell, it's going to be a little bit sharp.
That B is quite sharp, but unlike fixes in the upper register, a donut is a passive fix. Once it's in, you don't have to worry about it.
Other than the bell keys, this doesn't really affect anything else in my sound.
Yeah.
It's very subtle.
Do you feel behind the horn it's like more resistant or any change back there?
When I'm playing softly, there might be a touch more resistance in the bell keys, but it's really nothing to write home about.
Yeah. When it comes to the key work, that's another big part of buying the horn. I think jazz players and classical players have different priorities. Obviously, it's a big change of mechanics when you're going from a 2005 to,
1958.
1958. Much more simple on that horn.
Yeah.
Has the ergonomics or the mechanism of the horn been an adjustment, pluses or minuses when you're going back in time like that?
There is definitely a bit of a learning curve when it comes to, really with anyone changing equipment after, a certain amount of years, there are evidently going to be some elements of the way, you play and employ your technique that are going to be changed. Mm-hmm. With this instrument in particular, the biggest things for me in terms of like the way my hands feel was definitely first the action. This horn has got a little bit lower action. It's got a little bit more compact feel. Yeah. When I was playing the two side by side, I picked up the reference and I was just like, whoa, this thing feels huge in the hands. My left hand, if you can see, is like wrapping around pretty significantly.
That low B flat really stretches away from the left hand stack.
Yeah, exactly. And then with this, with the more compact key work of the six, I'm not stretching as much, and evidently it's less tension on my pinky, which allows me to get around in the spatula key a little bit more easily and a little bit more fluidly. The absence of the high F sharp key, a little bit like phantom limb syndrome over here. The first couple months I had this horn, I definitely caught myself reaching for my imaginary high F sharp key. But, it's something that I've gotten used to. There are ways around it, just using the X key high F sharp. The other thing I will say is with the smaller key work, also the palm keys are a little bit more compact and they feel to me a little bit more reachable. I thought about getting risers installed, but with this one rubber riser on the high F key, that's really all I need, to get access all these keys. I don't have to do a whole lot.
Well, you sound great on it, and it's clearly working out for you. Now, to go a completely different direction, you'd said in the past you actually played a Series 3
Yes.
alto for a while, which is what I play, but in a totally different context. So I'm going to hand this over to him, and we're going to see what happens. All right, so while Kyle's getting the Series 3 together, this is my horn. It's a circa 2001 serial number. The Series 3 is kind of the odd duck in Selmer's lineup because it has a different body tube than the Reference 54 and the Series 2 and the Selmer Axos. I think the only horn that shares a similar kind of body tube is the Supreme. And this was the only horn with a C-sharp correction mechanism, and it introduced so many changes that I feel like a lot of people kind of reacted negatively against the Series 3 back in the late 90s. But now it's 2020, and I feel like more people are playing it. So why don't you give that a blow and see what you think?
I have a lot of affinity for this horn. The sound profile of this horn, oddly enough, it seems to me to be closer to my 6 than the Reference.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And it could be me just being picky with the intonation issues, but in terms of the ease of the projection, it's a little bit on the darker side, I feel like, which goes a little bit more in line with the 6, whereas my Reference, it could get a little bit blatty in some registers,
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as dark as the 6 though. It's kind of in between.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely. Cool. So in terms of the key work, it feels, again, it feels like a modern Selmer, but the action on this instrument is a little bit higher, and everyone's got their preferences with that. Everyone's gonna have their techs do different things.
Yeah.
But for me, I see the positive in this because the keys are responsive.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable to play and just feel the horn giving you some feedback. I think about just making the horn vibrate. Especially when you're just trying to sing and produce a nice sound. You're gonna feel it in your hands when the horn is really vibrating. With you. And I definitely feel that on this horn, I could see myself playing this horn for years, regardless of what I'm doing, if I'm doing classical or jazz or rock, this horn is very versatile. So I give it a lot of props for that.
All right, yeah. So, you sound so good on this. Now, it is one thing to play these horns for jazz. You have your own needs, you have your own sound, and there's different expectations. We're going to flip the switch, and I'm going to talk about these horns in kind of a classical light. So first, I'm going to just play my horn right here because it's a point of reference. You all have heard me on this a million times. I'm not going to say my setup because you've heard it in every other video, but just a quick little scale, and maybe I'll play something lyrical on here. So the reason I like this horn is Kyle was talking about the key work, feeling responsive under the hands, and I have big hands, so I don't mind having a little bit higher action. And the Series 3 is kind of known for feeling a little bit bigger in the fingers, especially in those palm keys, and you were talking about in the pinky keys as well. So with my giant hands, that's a plus. Now, if you're a player with smaller hands, that's not a plus. You also talked about feeling the whole horn resonate. And I think that, to me, it's really funny you mentioned that. That's the central characteristic of the Series 3 is I don't hear the tube. I don't hear the sound traveling through the tube. I hear the sound radiating from all parts of the horn. It's very round and diffuse, even if it's not necessarily bright or dark. It's just kind of in the middle. So that's the kind of concept I like.
On the outside looking in, I definitely hear what you're saying about, the sound concept. My immediate reaction is like the warmth of the sound, and I can hear what you're saying because it's a very broad sound, It's not like, I feel like with the 6 and the reference, is a little bit more like laser focused. It can be piercing at times. With this, it's very warm, feels, a spacious sound concept, not saying bright or dark, because you're right, it's a little bit like in the middle.
Now, before I go over to one of the other horns, I have something interesting. I don't have a Series 2 alto with me today because I just don't have access to one, but I do have a Series 2 neck, and really most of the sound of the instrument can come down to the neck choice, and obviously the rest of the horn matters, but I would say at least half the sound of the horn is in the neck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this Series 2 neck on my Series 3 sax. I just want to see if you hear any difference at all, and you might or you might not. So just give this a little bit of a blow.
It's interesting to me because, in my ears, I hear the most about someone's sound profile in like the top of the register and like how they like deal with that register. And with that neck on, it's interesting to me because I feel like the upper register sounds like maybe a bit more focused. But I mean, otherwise, I think it's pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, they're both Selmers, right? A lot of Series 2 players actually will switch the 3 neck onto their horns. A lot of the players find the 2 necks to be a little more focused, but on the negative side, some people can find that constrained. Maybe like it holds back, especially in that upper register. I don't know if you caught it, but on the chromatic scale, my high F sharp actually cracked, which it never does with the other neck. When I was playing a full Series 2 horn full time, that was a very conscious problem all the time and always a problematic note. So I would describe the Series 2 neck as more focused, but perhaps not as even and not as big a sound. All right, so why don't we try reference 54? We're going to go from modern to modern classic.
What, 2001 to 2005?
Why not? Seriously, that E flat key is tiny.
Yeah, it's so small.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit brighter in general. Like, I feel like closer to the edge of the spectrum in terms of like not necessarily focus, but it's a little bit more cutting of a sound.
Yeah.
And then right away, obviously, you can tell that, you're having to adjust the intonation on it. For me, having played that horn for so long, that of course that's what I'm going to be thinking about. But like, it's still got a very like pleasant sound profile and something that might be a viable option for someone looking for a sound a little bit brighter, more focused than the Series 3.
This was interesting to play. I felt that the sound was less even. I felt that brighter quality in the upper register, but in the lower register, I thought it became a little more muted. But that's from behind the horn, and the experience is always different behind versus in front. So I'm gonna have to listen to the recording and see. That upper register brightness is different. So like if I'm playing like forcefully, like I hear a really pingy quality to it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it ventures on to thinness with my setup. I would probably have to make a change to fill it out a little bit.
I felt the same issue with like, the way I play jazz on it too. Like, I noticed some parts of the horn getting thin.
There's the differences between multiple horns, this is probably a good reference, but maybe another reference wouldn't have that problem, or who knows. But even more apparent to me was the difference in ergonomics in key work. Even just the placement of the main stack, my hands have a different kind of spread. My fingers fall differently. The action on this horn, while not quite as visibly low as your Mark VI, it feels lower than my 3. I think my 3 is particularly open. The palm keys are, to me, they feel really spread out, which can be an asset. To me, I like the compact palm keys on my Series 3, and you won't see any risers on there or anything. This feels like a Series 2. Yeah, the Series 2, it feels different in the hands, like the left-hand pinky, the left-hand pinky table, and the left-hand palm in particular. The thing that threw me the most was perhaps these pinky keys on the right hand. They use the Mark VI style round ones, and they're tiny, really small. Right. And, they're also round on the Series 3, but not quite as small as the reference 54, but not quite as big as the Series 2. You've seen those Series 2 keys. They're like kind of spatula shaped, really strange.
Huge.
Really big. So I can see how this will let you go fast. These keys are really light, but you have to be really precise. Let me just test those octaves with the classical setup. That A is really sharp. That C sharp's a big offender, and that's with me making no adjustments, which we would never really do. If I go back to my Series 3, those octaves are different. I actually thought the low B flat was okay for me.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, on mine it's not, it's sharp. Kind of like the Mark VI, those bell keys are a little sharp again.
Yeah.
But check out these middle octaves. I'm doing nothing. It's just in tune. The A is probably slightly sharp, but nothing like that high A. And the C sharp, because of the C sharp correction key here, it closes the top C sharp and opens up the bottom one, so it's more in tune. Let's check out the Mark VI. I'm ready. All right, so we got this Mark VI. Right away, I can tell it's lighter. It almost feels like my Series 3, which is weird because this is a ribbed horn. I don't know if the walls are thinner or something, but this is light.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's hear it.
It's brighter in a similar way the reference was, but I feel like it's not as like pingy.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit more warmth to the sound of that. And people say like, oh, you can only play jazz, only jazz people play the Mark VI, but like a pretty good classical sound to me.
Yeah, you can get by on a Mark VI. I guess I'll get by on a 5-digit Mark 6. What I noticed was those lower bell keys, they really like to speak loud, because that low B flat was boom, came right out. The intonation wasn't quite as wild as what I was expecting. You build up in your mind, oh, it's an old horn, so you're going to have to watch out for the intonation and voice. But I tried to not do that, and I found that it was mostly pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
So that's a really good Mark 6, if you can say that. I would say with the tone, the timbre is where the compromise is made. I hear it as being less even than either of the modern horns. Not with tuning, but with the timbre. Thinking of the spectral response. Because check it out. Check out this middle C versus the B that's next door. The C has a very different character. So here's the B. There's a lot of rich overtones in that B, but then the C comes really muted in comparison.
Right.
But on a jazz setup with plenty of brilliance in the sound and real projection, you don't hear it at all.
I will say I still feel it when I play, kind of that like it's exactly that. It's like it sounds like it's muted a little bit. You're not getting as much as the overtones out of it. With that in mind, projecting correctly and making sure you're on the right equipment. It's negotiable.
Yeah, I think there's more flexibility in your setup, so you can push harder. Get that C. But if I just push harder, the C just goes flat and doesn't change. So here's my C. It's a real big difference, and the classical setup's just less flexible to adapt to those changes that are kind of in the horn. Another place where I felt the things changed was going from middle C to the D. Again, a little bit more muted quality, which is kind of what you expect with the middle D. But it's weird because usually you'd expect the low D to be muted, but I didn't find that. That low D pops right out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I bet they had messed with octave pit size and octave pit placement throughout the Mark 6 run, because if you look on my 3, the pit placement and size is a little bit different than the Mark 6, and I'm sure if you looked on your reference, it'd be the same. But all that aside, this is a lot of fun to play. Yeah. You guys go for that classic Marcel Mule sort of sound,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Between all these horns, they all have their pluses. I could play any one of them, and I'm sure you could as well. As a classical player, what I'm looking for is even action. I'm looking for reliable intonation, and I'm looking for not having to adjust for the tone. So for all of that stuff, the Series 3 does what I need it to do. But as a jazz player, what are you looking for, and how do any of these horns tick off all those boxes?
I would say the most important concept for me when I was looking for a new saxophone was the sound profile. Something that sings in a way that I can, I'm not afraid to associate myself with. It's your paintbrush, as an artist. In terms of the intonation, I'm looking for something that I'm not really going to have to be fighting, that's going to respond well. Obviously, I'll have to make the adjustments, but also it's important to have a horn that will respond to your adjustments, When I tried a lot of instruments, I didn't try just Mark 6s. I tried a lot of modern horns, and I played some amazing horns that happened to be brand new, too. I think a lot about a combination of how the ergonomics of the horn feel in my hand, how does the horn feel when it's vibrating in my hands, and then how does the sound respond to that. With the 6, I just have a great love for kind of what it's giving back to me. Any sort of energy I'm putting into it, it's producing a sound that, I can, manipulate and respond to in a way that's going to shape who I am as an improviser and a musician. But when it comes to the modern horns, it's taking those concepts and putting it in a context with modern ergonomics, thinking about how the reference in the Series 3 felt bigger in my hand, both had a little bit of a higher action, I really appreciated that. Yeah. And then coupled that with the more modern materials and how they respond, it's still a beautiful thing. And that's why I was able to play on this reference for the better part of a decade. I came down to the 6 because of, mainly the sound profile. The scale isn't perfect, but it's even enough for me to, negotiate any extremity of the horn the way I'd like to.
With your jazz setup, you have the flexibility to kind of work around these quirks in different ways, and every horn is a compromise. There's no horn that is going to be exactly everything you need it to be, whether it's the ergonomics, the sound, the tone, evenness, the intonation. So it's about finding something that has those compromises that you can live with. So, my Series 3, the compromises are, they're expensive to get new, and the sound is very homogeneous, but some people would say it lacks character. And of course, those bell keys are a little bit sharp. And then compromises on your reference, it's, wonderful ergonomics, but perhaps maybe not quite the character of a Mark VI, and what is a Mark VI anyway, because they made them for so long. And then, of course, your Mark VI is its own kind of compromises, and you have to find what works for you. There's a lot of players out there that treat the Mark VI as the gold standard, the zenith to which all saxophones must work.
The Stradivarius of saxophones.
Yes. Would you say that is true, or would you say maybe not?
Maybe not, just because of thinking about, where we've come technologically in 2021 with the way saxophones are made today. That sort of profile is attainable by a lot of saxophone makers. Once you take all of the folklore and the superstition out of it, it's a matter of what saxophone fits who you are as a person and fits your musical character. Circumstances had led me to this instrument, and I'm happy with the way things turned out, and I hope to play on this saxophone for many years to come. But I have absolute respect for anyone who can say the same thing about a Yanagisawa or a modern Selmer or a Yamaha.
Yeah, it's just another saxophone, and the Mark VI does so many things that I think gives it a broad appeal. A lot of people like them, and especially in jazz communities, it does a lot of the stuff that jazzers need it to do these days. But back in the day, it was also the choice classical horn until maybe the Series II came out. There's still very small pockets of classical players that regrettably force their students to buy Mark VIs and use them with very specific setups. And I think both of us would agree, any classical, jazz, or other sax teacher that forces their student to get a certain horn to play a very specific way, that's not necessarily good.
Absolutely agree. Everyone's profile as a musician is a product of their own experience in life. And also just the fact that, humans are built anatomically differently. It's hard to really put a pin on, how to approach, what mouthpiece is going to be right for you or what horn's going to be right for you. But for a teacher to say, you have to play on this instrument with this mouthpiece, this reed, that really puts the player in a box.
It's okay to have a student say, all right, here's a few choices that I know will kind of get you in the right direction. But, once you get a little older, every student kind of goes their own way. My undergraduate experience, I played on a Series 2 and an AL3 like my teacher, not because I was told to, but by choice. I wanted to be like my teacher. And now I play something completely different. Like none of my teachers. None of my teachers played a Series 3, but I do. And some of my teachers played S90 mouthpieces, and some didn't. What do you play on with your mouthpiece, by the way, Kyle?
Yeah, so I just switched to Van Doren this past school year. I'm playing a V16 A6S Plus, and I pair it with an Ishimori pink gold plated woodstone ligature, and I play Boston Sax Shop reeds. I recently made this switch in October after having played on the same previous mouthpiece for the better part of half a decade.
Yeah.
So, that change did not come lightly, but I'm I'm enjoying my time on this Van Doren for sure.
I've played on 3 mouthpieces in the last 10 years. I had an AL3, then I played on a C-Star until I dropped it, and then I played a S90.
So I played on a Diodario Jazz Select for a long time. I played on another V16, an A7. I played a Meyer 5 for a while, and then I also played an MC Gregory.
You just got to find what works for you and try a lot of stuff. And we say we've played 3 or 4 mouthpieces in the last 10 years. I try stuff regularly to know what's out there and to help people make good choices, but I don't buy most of it, and you'd probably say the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely tried my fair share, but those are like the core of mouthpieces I've really spent time like working on.
So at the end of the day, we'll say, does everyone need a Mark VI, Kyle?
I'm going to give a resounding no.
They need a saxophone.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. This was a wonderful discussion, and you're a killer player. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Well, if you're interested in checking me out, feel free to check out my YouTube channel at Kyle Brooks Saxophone. Check out my website at kylebrooksaxophone.com. And I want to say, Josh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to come on here and talk about, the gear that I spend so many days, weeks, nights on.
More to come, y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. This was Joshua Heaney. Thanks for watching.